Welcome to Boombostic Health, where we challenge the business of healthcare and explore bold ideas that drive meaningful change. Each week, we bring you candid conversations with top experts, innovators, and leaders, exploring the latest trends and technologies shaping the future of healthcare. Join us and be part of the conversation in transforming healthcare. Welcome to our next episode of Boombostic Health, where my good friend Michael Zaccaro is on the show, and he may or may not admit that he's my good friend, but it is true. And Michael is one of the most incredible entrepreneurs who has had this fantastic success story, but he really got into it pretty unwittingly. Grew up in the Chicago area, and I think I'll just let you tell your story. So maybe if you could just dive in, Michael, just give us a quick introduction on who you are and how you got into healthcare. That might fill the whole podcast.
All right. Well, I appreciate you having me out here, Bradley, and looking forward to the conversation. But I really tell everybody I kind of stumbled into healthcare. I grew up, I was delivering beer for a living initially, worked in a lumberyard for 4 years after that.
Delivering beer.
Then
did you deliver the beer to the lumberyard?
No, but we did do a lot of beer drinking when I was at the lumberyard.
Okay, got it. Okay, so that's how it all came together.
It is.
That's how your training was building. You were building toward this apex.
There you go. But I did that for a while. Was about 25 years old when a friend of mine was working at a company that was doing inventories for pharmaceutical products, mostly for independent retail pharmacies.
Okay.
I needed to do something besides manual labor and decided that I would give this a shot.
And about how old were you at this point?
Mid-20s, is probably 24, 25 at the time.
Yeah.
So did nothing but manual labor my entire life. Went to work for this really small company, 5 people deep. And we started doing this service, providing this inventory service for these pharmacies. As part of that service, we would remove the expired goods from the shelf and leave it for the pharmacy, and they had no idea what to do with it. There was one company that had popped up that was filling this need of processing those expired goods and getting them their credit back.
So were you just taking all these bottles that were expired and just putting them in a box somewhere?
Pretty much, and leaving them for the pharmacist, and then he didn't know what to do with it. Okay. So the owner, a friend of mine, myself, decided that we could help them with this process and started up this very small pharmaceutical reverse distribution company. So now, after the inventory, we would actually take the product into the basement of the pharmacy and get on our hands and knees with the Kansas City Pharmacist Manual, carbon forms, a taper, and sort the product by hand, write it up by hand, return it back to the manufacturer so that they could get credit. And that's where I got exposed to the industry. I was comfortable being at a startup and comfortable being at a small company. Thought it was going to be a great opportunity. Turned out that the owner wasn't such a great guy and didn't have a super great idea for what he wanted to do with it either. There was not a lot of downside for me to go out and do this on my own. I was making $7 an hour and $21,000 a year. I figured if I got 5 customers, I'd be in great shape. Decided actually I was on my honeymoon at the time, decided I was going to go ahead and give this a shot, came back, hired a friend of mine to do the first software development. 9 months later, I had started my company and we were off.
And what year was that?
So it would have been 1996, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah.
So to frame up this whole topic, to me, it's 2 things. One is just the entrepreneurial journey and how, like, most people don't have a crystal ball. In fact, none that I've come across yet. Some people claim to, but usually they're just full of it. The other side is just how much waste there is in healthcare and how many of these areas where there's inefficiency, they open up opportunities for people to take advantage of some type of entrepreneurial pathway. And you used a lot of words in there that to you are just second nature, but the one that the phrase that really intrigues me, and I think we should educate our audience on, is this, I think you called it reverse pharmaceutical distribution?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So people are familiar with forward distribution, right?
Uh-huh.
So that's getting product to the wholesaler or getting it to the pharmacy. What we do is literally that process in reverse. So we're taking it back from the pharmacy, comes back to our facility, and then it goes back to the manufacturer. If you think about this, it's a pretty small niche within healthcare, and it's a pretty small niche within pharmaceutical. But if you think about
But a small niche inside of healthcare can be a pretty large number too.
Correct. The industry itself is huge outside of healthcare. If you think about return goods and reverse distribution when it comes to e-commerce, right? So I don't know about you, but if I buy a pair of shoes off of Zappos, I buy 3 sizes and return 2. And that process is a headache, and that process is difficult and is not cost effective.
Well, and Zappos really pioneered that in certain respects with
free returns.
E-commerce. They said you can return as much as you want, right?
Yeah. When I started doing this, and this is where the waste really comes in. So because pharmacies are understaffed, because they have a lot of rules, a lot of regulations, DEA, EPA, Department of Transportation, this product was actually going dead while it was expired. So one of the things that exists in this industry is it's not an unlimited period of time that you have to return this for credit.
Oh, really?
Depending on the manufacturer, you have
And what does the manufacturer do with it once they
Nothing.
get it?
Nothing.
Okay. It's just, okay, so this is just the fuse that's there is they say, fine, if it doesn't get sold because we didn't market it well enough or it wasn't placed well enough, we'll give you the money back.
Yep.
But it has to be within 3 months, roughly.
3 months to 12 months is generally the time frame that you have to do it. So when I started the company and we started selling hospitals, Mount Sinai here in Chicago was one of my first customers. I'll never forget walking into their room. They had a closet from floor to ceiling overflowing. They had not processed returns for 4 years. And so the very first job that I did for them had an equal amount of returnable creditworthy product as well as non-returnable, non-creditworthy product. And that is an incredible amount of waste. And when healthcare is looking for every dollar and every last penny, just leaving that type of money out is it's just not the way to run a pharmacy. So you get these customers on a regular schedule. You get them on an every 3 to 4 month cycle. They don't run the risk that they're going to miss credits for stuff that missed its expiration date.
So did you have a big, or do you have a big warehouse or multiple warehouses, and every pharmacy has some person or a team that they go in there, and is it really computerized or is it very much manual where they just have to look at all the labels? Like, how does this actually look?
Yeah, so great question. When I started, it was incredibly manual intensive. I'm not kidding. Hands and knees, flipping through a book, trying to read policies. Since then, the entire process for us has been automated. So we're currently operating out of 125,000 square feet in Libertyville, Illinois. 3 years ago, we launched an entire business and data transformation to really build the business to a point where it could continue to scale. So we did a build or buy decision on every piece of software that we had inside the organization, and then made the decision to bring in automation. We're now doing more volume, in fact, twice as much volume, but headcount's down from 200 employees down to 140, and volume is up twice as much. So we've automated really the entire process.
Yeah.
We're able to get the product through our warehouse efficiently. We're able to get it back to the manufacturer quickly. And then the big piece for us is it's one thing to actually process it efficiently. Once you send it back to the manufacturer, though, to make sure that they're actually issuing that credit and to make sure that that credit is coming back for the dollar amount that the wholesalers or pharmacies are owed is an important piece. So we go from
an audit trail, basically.
We go from a big logistics in and out moving product scenario to a collection agency.
Interesting.
Right after the product goes out, and we spend as much time and effort trying to collect the credit as we did processing it.
And when you collect the credit, you share in that with the pharmacy?
Yeah,
Is that
exactly. It's basically a revenue sharing opportunity. So we typically will take a percentage of the amount that we recover for our customers. They get the majority of that. We pick up a fee to.
Did you ever give the option of almost doing factoring, where you would just say, "Hey, we'll guarantee you this amount," and then you capture more of that?
So that's really what we shifted to probably about 5 years ago. Customers loved it, and good for our business as well. But what we started with is we used to estimate how much credit was going to come back, and then take a percentage of that. Well, the problem is manufacturers issue credits all over the board.
Right.
Some in 30 days, some in 90 days. Some won't send you the credit until you call them. Even then, the credits don't come back in.
They're just looking to talk to you.
They would rather not issue it to begin with.
It's kind of like insurance, right? Their whole job is to not pay you.
Yeah, and some of them do it that way. So
it's like when they put this policy in place, they hoped nobody would ever actually do it.
True. It's
and then you showed up.
Well, it's true. And competitors.
Oh no, Zaccaro's here again.
Competitors in the space as well. So there was a whole push early on where manufacturers said, "We're not going to talk to you if you're the outsourced company. We only want to talk to the pharmacy." And there was enough pressure and enough momentum where manufacturers finally acquiesced and would deal with us.
That's fascinating.
But they did not want to do it. So the challenge for pharmacies is they didn't know what's coming back. They don't know when they're going to get their credits. They don't have any more personnel to deal with the reconciliation of the credits than they did with the processing of it. And so we did about 5 years ago shift the majority of our business to a model where we take it back, figure out how much it's worth. We cut a check to the pharmacy within 14 days of when we receive it.
Okay. So that's part of the reason they would work with you is
it.
you're fast.
They love it. They, if you think about hospitals and independent retail pharmacies, particularly on the independent retail pharmacy side, it is very possible to be profitable and bankrupt at the same time. And so cash flow is critical.
Because their cash flow is so upside down.
It's exactly how it works. So they will take advantage of this program. They get that cash back into their pocket.
You may be the way that they keep the lights on while they're waiting.
In many
for
ways
these
it
big
is.
cash
In many ways it is.
Huh, that's fascinating. Wow. And it's the company is called Pharma Logistics, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And did you name it that?
Yeah. Arguably one of the most difficult decisions I had to make when I started the company. Had no idea what we were going to call it. It was a bunch of different names, but I did.
So if you fast forward to how this journey played out, it started with a handful of people and you were manually going in with paper and boxes, and then over time you started to realize that this could actually be like a big business. What do you recall any specific like forks in the road? I mean, having been on the entrepreneurial journey my whole adult life, I know that there are these like crucible moments that come up where it's you have to make a tough decision, and the decision is going to impact whether you make it or not. Were there any of those moments that you can think of?
Yeah, sure. Over 27 years, there were probably a half dozen. I can remember pretty clearly the first one, and that's really when you make the decision that you are going to. When I started my company, I gave myself a job. There was no business plan. There was no grand idea.
You were trying to go take over the world.
I was in survival mode. I had 2 kids. I needed to make money. This was the job that I gave myself. And then there comes a point where you realize that it's less about you and more about the people, and it's less about what you do and more about the systems and processes. And when you morph from understanding that it's just not what's in your head to, and I'm not going to give myself a job, but what I'm going to do is build a company. That whole shift to me is the first piece. You have to be focused on building systems, processes, and recognizing that it's about people. So that for me, what I would say was the first one. And I was admittedly a terrible manager, and I had no mentors for this. I kind of learned on the fly.
You understood the business deeply, but the part about training and bringing on and structuring it and growing
it made all the difference. I feel like I developed that skill set over time. Initially, that was not my strength, and so I spent time working on that. I surrounded myself with other entrepreneurs. I read as much as I could. I tried to educate myself on that piece, and I would say that was one of the biggest ones. If you go forward, there's always these decisions that you have to make on whether you're going to put money in and be aggressive or, play it safe and take it off to the side. I would say another big decision was we pursued the Department of Defense contract for the first time about 15 years ago and literally swallowed the whale. We won it.
Right.
And I had no idea how we were going to process it.
Right.
It was literally 6 times the volume that we were processing at that point. I had not the capacity for it. I didn't have the people for it, but made the decision that we were going to go ahead and do it, and I'd figure it out later.
Right.
And in retrospect, that was a great decision because about 4 months into that contract, we had figured it out.
Okay.
And
so it was a forcing function. You don't really know where the weak spots are until you put stress on the system, right?
And it was a lot of stress, but it was really one of those moments that moved us from a smaller regional player to a national company. In fact, now international. We have customers in Germany and in Japan at this point.
Does the business model look pretty much the same in those other? Oh, and it's Department of Defense. I talked over you there. Okay, interesting.
Yeah, it's the overseas part is only Department of Defense. This industry only exists in the United States.
Yeah.
It doesn't exist in any other market.
Because medicine doesn't expire anywhere else?
It expires everywhere. It's just in a lot of other places, it's not paid for privately. It's so there's a lot of
So you just dispose of it?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is like a really rudimentary question. But how do they...
Those are the ones I need. Those are the ones I'm good with.
So how does one come up with the expiration date? Because I can tell you, I've taken some Tylenol that was way expired, and I'm pretty sure my headache got better, and I didn't die or anything. Like how did Tylenol come up with that arbitrary date? Because it seems fine.
Well, so I'm not a pharmacist, so I'm not going to pretend to give pharmaceutical advice.
We make up a lot of stuff.
I will say this. I will say this. I have expired stuff in my cabinet. I take it as well.
All right, and it works out. You're just working out fine. You look great. It's the secret.
I appreciate that, but a lot of this is I think a lot of this is simply to get again, forward distribution of the product to begin with. It's kind of a self-serving piece of the industry.
Okay. So it's maybe not all about the science.
I don't think it's all about the science. And I have not had a manufacturer.
It's kind of mysterious.
I have not had a manufacturer confirm that, but I don't think it's all
They
about
could tell you,
science.
but then they'd have to kill you.
I mean, here's the deal. If your Tylenol expires, you're mostly inclined to go out and buy another bottle of Tylenol.
Sometimes. I mean, it depends.
Or you, maybe not you. Maybe not you.
I mean, maybe my vitamins, right? But just kidding. Okay. No, but in any event, so it's inconclusive as to why, but we know that it does. And to your point, and to follow up on this, to your point, there is and this is in the Department of Defense as well. There's something called the SLEP program, and it is an acronym for the Shelf Life Extension Program. Okay.
So literally what will happen is the government buys all of this product. They'll bring in a chemist. They'll bring in a team of research people. They'll take samples of it, and they will retest it. And if it retests and has an efficacy that is still they're comfortable dispensing to patients, they'll slap another sticker on it and give it another 2 years of shelf life. So to your point, it's not always bad.
Interesting. So the journey you've been on didn't start like a lot of the sensational success stories where you had gone and studied under some genius and came out in the world and said, I'm going to fix healthcare. It was you were looking to be useful and make a difference and have a job, and you started doing that. And I'm picking up that there wasn't some venture funding event either. You grew this and controlled all of it. Is that right?
I was bootstrapped from the beginning. I have an allergic reaction to debt to begin with and didn't have a lot of resources to begin with. I started my company with a $10,000 loan from my uncle, who was a concrete entrepreneur himself. And gross receipts in year one was $800. And so the business was purely grown through cash flow for really the first 20 years. And the only debt that I ultimately took was to build the warehouse that I built probably 4 years ago. So it was always, it was just a comfort level that I had.
Just kept taking one step after the next and after the next, and then it was a 20-year overnight success.
Yeah, that's exactly, literally, that's exactly how it worked. I'd argue if I go back to this, and you got to do what you're comfortable with. I was not comfortable with a significant, in fact, I wasn't comfortable with any debt. My guess is that if I was, it would have scaled that much quicker. But I needed to be profitable every month.
And you slept at night.
And I slept at night.
Good. So eventually you got to the point where you decided, hey, we could use some outside capital, or you decided maybe you wanted to spend less time operating, and you ended up delving into this private equity world.
Yeah.
Could you talk some about how you made that decision, what that process looked like? A lot of the people that listen to the podcast are entrepreneurs or innovators who maybe at some point could have the chance to do something similar.
Yeah, sure. No, I'm happy to do it. So really what happened was I had no idea or no plan to sell my company. I didn't know what else I would ever do except continue to run it. And what initially happened was I got an unsolicited offer from a PE firm to buy my company.
And how did they find you?
So a good friend of mine that I golf with said, hey, I'm working with this PE firm, and if you'd basically like some free consulting, they'll let you know what you need to do better. And if you ever want to sell, they'll tell you what's working, what's not working, and they'll help you do this. So I said, sure. We signed an NDA and I exchanged some information. And 2 weeks later, they came back and said, that looks great. Let me see some more information. And I gave them that. And about 6 or 7 weeks of giving them information, I had gotten no consulting in return yet. And I was wondering what was happening here. I called up my buddy Charlie and said, Charlie, I haven't seen anything from these guys yet. What's going on? They said, don't worry, something's coming in 2 weeks. Well, instead of free consulting, they sent me an LOI.
Okay.
And it was at that point where I realized that there was something on the other side. And then I had a decision to make, which was I could take this first offer and be committed to the one person that actually wanted to date me, or I could make the decision that I was going to run a full process. So I brought in a lot of good people. I tapped my network, had a lot of lunches and dinners over about a 7-day period, and made the decision that I would run a full process. I hired an investment bank to represent us. I went ahead and literally did the full process, and we went out to about 150 firms to begin with, and took about 2 years to finally get to the finish line. Longer than a lot of companies, and there were a lot of reasons for that, but it took about 2 years.
It usually takes longer than what anybody wants.
I learned that for sure.
So going back to the dating kind of metaphor there, you decided to go to the investment bank, which is kind of like the business version of like Bumble or something?
Yeah, they were like the match. They were,
you
absolutely. They were the matchmaker.
So you swiped left on that first one.
There you go.
And then so after that, they
came back.
They kept coming?
And they were one of the finalists when we ultimately did exit. They really liked the space. Good guys. I liked them a lot, but I really felt like I had done a lot in my career. I had started the company from scratch. I did my own acquisition of a division of Stericycle about 4 years before that. The only thing that I felt like I did not do in my career was a full-blown sales process, and felt like if I exited without doing that, I would have left something on the table.
Yeah.
And I wanted that challenge. I kicked myself in the head many times during that 2-year period because of the amount of work and effort.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, both the process and the outcome was great for me.
Well, and the business kept moving forward. So you must have done a good job of building a good team that was running it, because you were spending a bunch of time with these different private equity investors. And
I will say this, it made all of the difference. I would say that ultimately the firm, and we ended up partnering with Assured Healthcare Partners on this, but all of the firms that came to look at us were most impressed with the team that had been assembled, and were most impressed with the fact that this was a plug-and-play opportunity for them. While there were positions that they were going to need to backfill or positions that they would want to add, what they were inheriting was a team of people that had been there, had been battle tested. Most of these individuals had worked with me for 5+ years, some 15 years.
Right.
And that was of tremendous appeal to them when they came and looked at us.
Well, so they're assessing risk and determining where the soft spots are, what could go wrong.
For sure.
And so you had continuity of your team. You had also, you said, made a commitment to technology and invested in technology. How much did that affect the private equity's interest?
I think it was huge, and in support of that, so we really positioned this as we're the platform for additional acquisitions, and the reason that we felt comfortable with that is because of the investments that we have made. I personally believe that CEOs, while they have to be responsible for the entire organization, generally fall on one of two sides. They're either operationally focused or they're sales focused. I was a really strong operator, and I really enjoyed the operation side of it. And so that got all of my attention. And so we did about all said and done, it was about an $8 million investment in automation and technology. And when we went to market, positioned it as this is the platform to roll up other entities. And I would say that has proven to be true, because 8 months into this, we made our first acquisition after I had sold, and that business is going to be rolled directly into our processing center. And we're really excited about what that's going to look like.
And is that a competitor that was in the market?
Yeah. We rolled up, relatively small industry, but let's say that we were 3. We bought the 4th largest company.
Okay. So is that the intention moving forward? You continue to grow organically and maybe
I think it's both. I think the one thing that we got admittedly beat up on in our sales process was the lack of pipeline and the lack of sales growth. The growth was there
because you grew more slow and steady, and they were looking for some type
they're looking for more of that J curve type of growth pattern. So for us, it was a smaller. It was less than desirable from their side. So we did get marked down for that, but we did get the benefit of the technology. They knew that they didn't have a lot of capital investment. They knew that it could plug and play, and the business was cash flowing. And they really
a healthy business.
They really liked that.
Yeah, healthy economics.
You got it.
So not to get into too much granular detail, but different businesses in different industries are valued in different ways. And as an entrepreneur that's putting your life's work into something, it's helpful to know how you should consider that, because you see the headlines about these unicorn situations, and in reality, if that's what you expect, you should just go buy lottery tickets because you're more likely to hit the lottery, right? And so in your case, you had an idea of what the metrics should be because these private equity folks gave you a LOI. But was it a multiple of your profit, your EBITDA? Was it some cash flow formula? What was the spreadsheet?
In our space, and this was really true from all of the suitors that we eventually had. I think there were about 20 companies that expressed an initial interest in it, but all of them measuring it off of multiple of EBITDA is really how they looked at it, and that varied
depending on the growth rate, probably.
Well, it depended on a couple of things. One was, certain firms were 2 to 3 times more in terms of 2 or 3 turns more than some of the offers that we got, because they believed that they could layer it into an existing operation that they had. Due diligence proved in a couple of those instances it didn't make sense for them. But all of them came with a multiple of EBITDA as the way that they were going to do it. And for me, this was just me personally. I got a lot of advice from mutual friends about cash up front was important.
Right,
So for me, I wanted to make sure that I got as much cash up front while still being able to participate in the upside.
Right.
So I did roll a significant amount of equity into the new entity, but I was very comfortable with the cash up front, and that I needed the cash up front to be comfortable with actually moving aside and stepping aside, because I don't run the day-to-day anymore. I have a board role and a commitment to the company to continue to help it, but I'm no longer involved day-to-day.
Okay. So the part about like rolling some into this go forward entity, you're still an owner. You still have some ownership in that.
Correct.
And are there strings attached to that at all? Like reps and warranties related things, or any other like deal details that you'd be comfortable sharing, just to help people better understand what the structure is, because the buyer is looking to make sure that they get a good return, and they want to make sure everything is what you said it was.
Well, so and again, this was a big piece. You learn this pretty early on, but everything's negotiable. And so the more I pushed for more cash up front, the more they wanted to protect their downside. And so that was the trade that we made.
Right.
So in my deal, when you look at, if we were to sell today, if you look at the waterfall and who gets distributed first, they're going to get it. They've got preferred stock.
Right. They're sitting on top of the cap stack.
Exactly. They sit at the top of that table. My equity interest is lower than that. And if we were to sell today with a bunch of debt still on the company, then I would not receive as much as I would want to on this next turn. But as we continue to grow, as we pay down that debt, and ultimately as we grow the business, there's even more upside for me on the backside. It's very possible that the next turn actually is more profitable than the first one.
Okay.
The way that this is structured, if I had to get out today, they're protected more so, because some of the equity that I put in, it actually goes to them in this cap table until we hit certain.
So it's almost like there's a hurdle rate where they have to hit some level of return.
Exactly.
And then you get to participate, which makes sense.
It does make sense. It's a risk reward scenario for them. And again, I go back to cash up front was important. And so this was the trade I was willing to make.
And the group that you're partnered with, their expectations on your board participation, is it like once a quarter you're showing up for a meeting, or their board calls in between? Or
Yeah, they're great. So, and it's been a really good process. I've got a really good working relationship with them. We've both had conversations about horror stories of companies that go with the wrong PE firm. I do think that there were firms that we met with that, regardless of what their number would have been, I would not have wanted to work with them.
Would have been, not good.
It is in many ways like a marriage.
I personally have a no assholes policy, and I've been pretty lucky, but it's painful. I've had one board situation where I just was blown away at how misguided this board member was. And literally he would show up to every meeting and try to raise issues that just didn't exist. It was like he saw ghosts that, where there were none. Yeah. And I just was like, we're trying to build a company that's going to make healthcare better. And you're making up random ways that somebody might be conflicted that wants to invest in the company. It's just, so it really is a big decision. You have to find the right people who get what needs to get done.
I completely agree. And so, my advice to people that go through this process is find the right partner. And certainly the multiple matters and the deal structure matters, but you got to find the right partner. And so for me, I was very clear on this when I went to market that I was not going to stay. There are a lot of PE firms where their thesis is we only invest in founder-owned and founder-led businesses, and we don't want to be just investing money and then have the owner step aside.
Right. Yeah.
I was very clear that that's what I was going to do.
Yeah. Right.
And so the first thing we had to do was go out and hire a new CEO. We hired a great CEO, David Hargraves, came in from Premier.
Did you use a recruiter to find?
Yeah, the PE firm found him. I actually talked to him before he was hired, but he's been great. He took over my role right off the bat. I support him directly. This is an interesting piece, right? The team used to report to me and the company was mine. I made a very conscious decision to get out of the way. I didn't feel like hamstringing him with my involvement, but he's been great. And my involvement right now is 3 board meetings a year. And whenever David wants to grab a beer, I go have a beer with him and we talk shop.
Okay. That's great. It sounds like it's worked out really well.
It's been great.
Yeah. So one more healthcare item, and then wanted to switch gears a little bit to sort of life after, your PE exit and different things that you're doing. But what do you see happening in this reverse pharma distribution space over the next 20 years? I know it's a long horizon, but you've got AI, you've got these new capabilities. I don't know, is it humanoid robots in 20 years and you just, are hanging out like playing video games?
So great question. I think the industry itself is going to have to morph. If you think about reverse distribution and if you think about why it exists, it's basically a mistake in the supply chain.
Right.
There's too much product and not enough demand. And so the more analytics of that's taking place and the more just-in-time inventory happens, the
How
more
about a
you're going to see that.
compounding pharmacy built into like a 3D printer where you literally order the thing and instantly the exact number of pills
that
come
exists.
off the machine?
There are those companies that are doing that 3D printing actually product in pharmaceutical products right now. So there's from our side a continued pressure on better managing their inventory. I think as the industry morphs, it's going to be about providing the data on the backside to help them better manage that inventory, as opposed to fighting it. You're burying your head in the sand if you think that pharmacies aren't going to learn how to better manage their inventory. I've already seen it. That doesn't mean that it's going away. It just means that you got to be a piece of that and partner with them on that, as opposed to continuing to believe that they're going to continue to generate expired goods infinitum. It's not going to happen.
Yeah, interesting. So shifting gears, you worked for 20, how many years?
27 years.
27 years before you transacted with PE. Still involved, still care about the future, obviously, but now you've got time to do other things.
Yeah.
And are you getting bored at all? Are you finding things to spend your time on?
So I personally feel that I got a lot of great advice. The networking group that we're part of together has been very instrumental. One of the best pieces of advice that I got is after you exit, do not hurry to make the next decision and do not hurry to jump into anything else. And everybody told me that, and I'm really good at learning from others. I don't believe that my experience will be significantly different than yours. So tell me what works, I'll do that. I got a lot of that advice. And so January 17th is when I closed. Since then, I have completely taken my foot off the gas. Friends of mine make fun of me. And here's a story for you. I was on my way to a Tiger meeting, actually. I was in the right-hand lane driving. I look, all these cars are flying by to the left of me. And I'm like, man, these cars are really moving today. And I look down and I realized I was in the right-hand lane going less than the speed limit for the first time in my entire life. And it was because the entire pace for me slowed down after I exited. You forget how hard you're running and because you're just used to it day in and day out. About 2 months into it, my blood pressure dropped, my stress level dropped. I move at a pace right now where I can fill 6 hours in what I used to do in 2. And I kind of like it.
You're good with that.
I kind of like it.
That's awesome.
I enjoy golfing. I can't do that every day. But what's keeping me busy is I enjoy investing. I run a small family office now, and I enjoy evaluating deals, and I enjoy partnering with other entrepreneurs to identify other opportunities to stay invested, but more of a passive role as opposed to running a business and dealing with employees.
You're just doing the fun stuff.
I like the fun part. Yeah.
That's awesome.
I'm into the fun part right now.
Yeah. Well, Michael Zaccaro, I really appreciate our friendship and our partnership. We are working some in business together too, which is fun. And I'm happy to be the one running 80 hours a week.
And I enjoy supporting you while you're doing it.
I'm passing you in the left-hand lane. That's cool. But thank you for joining us for another episode of Boombostic Health, where we talked to Michael about his journey of really dealing with the critical part of the healthcare system and eliminating waste, and ultimately advancing all through the stages of startup all the way through an exit and an incredibly successful outcome and a great life. So loved talking to this and look forward to now having Emily come on for the verdict to talk some about some of the legal and regulatory considerations when you're moving on to that private equity stage. Thanks so much. Well, welcome to The Verdict with Emily, where we're discussing Michael Zaccaro's fascinating journey of building a reverse pharmaceutical distribution business, Pharma Logistics, into really one of the leaders in the space, and ultimately exiting to private equity, where he's rolled and continues to serve on the board. And his story was interesting in that instead of preparing up front for a process, he actually had a group come to him and say, a private equity group, and say, hey, here's a letter of intent. We'd like to acquire your business. And when he received that, he realized there was a lot of work to do, it sounds like, to really get prepared for a full process. So it was not until a couple years after that he ultimately chose a partner and went forward. Emily, would love to hear your thoughts, and based on your experience with these private equity transactions, what all would go into getting ready for a successful outcome like Michael had?
Yeah, so we've talked before about preparing to go to market and what that looks like and the steps you need to take to not just make the transaction run more smoothly, but to maximize the value of your business. And I think what was interesting about Michael's story is he was presented with that offer and then took a step back and said, okay, maybe we're not ready just yet. This is an exciting idea, but I could take some additional steps, grow the business a little bit more, and maximize the value and maybe make that transaction process go a little bit more smoothly, which I think he would probably echo that. And I think that's fascinating, right? Because it sort of is, I don't want to say a second thought, because that's not it at all. It was much more intentional than that. But he went through all of those steps, but it was after somebody had already told him that there was some value in what he could do and move it forward.
So you kind of had to slow down in order to speed up, it seems
Correct,
like.
exactly.
He also talked some about the team that he had put in place, which allowed him to run down the path of having that process become a successful outcome. But the layers of regulation on pharma distribution are massive, and the number of acronyms he rattled off, DEA, EPA, VOD, all these different things. How do you, if you're in a process or considering a process, even begin to know? It's like you'd have to have a spreadsheet just to keep track of all of that. Like how should one approach getting ready and really ensuring that they're complying with all these different regulations?
Yeah, so much more than a spreadsheet. I think he did a really great job in advance of making sure he had the compliance in place. Pharmacy is a highly regulated space, more so than I would say just about any other space in healthcare, just given the prescription medication aspect of it. But certainly making sure that you have all of the licensure that is required, whether it's actual state licensure, federal accreditation certificates. I think when you're in that space, you know it. It's sort of like baptism by fire. You know what you need and you know what you don't have, because you're going to get fined if you don't have it. But it sounds like Michael really took the steps to make sure that his business was operating compliantly, first and foremost, before he even considered any type of transaction. That's just the nature of healthcare. You need to know the regulatory space in which you operate. Yeah. Otherwise, you will be penalized.
Well, it sounds like he was a trailblazer too, where Absolutely. Originally when he got started and he moved from the Lumberyard to the beer
to drinking beer at the
trucks Lumberyard. To hanging out with his lumber buddies drinking beer to eventually counting how many pills were expired. He had to explain probably to some of these regulators what it even was that they were doing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then that became some of the legislation. So it's just such a fascinating, cool story, and a real testament to what when somebody has the resourcefulness and the resolve to go pursue an opportunity, they can create something really fantastic. It was also interesting to talk to him a bit about the future of the pharma distribution space, mm-hmm. and the idea that eventually there will be a much more on-demand approach, because today reverse pharma distribution only exists because of the waste and the imperfection of how the supply chain is set up. It's got waste in it. So the most important question I have, though, is how far after the expiration date of your Tylenol are you still willing to take that risk?
Oh, this is not legal advice or medical advice. Disclaimer there. I
mean,
know,
if you have
like 18 months.
18 months.
18 months.
And then if it doesn't work, you can always try some Aleve, right?
Yeah,
or something like that.
Exactly.
So,
Which, 6 months for Aleve.
All right, good. Okay, good. I mean, I typically bring in a chemist who then can test it to just see if it's...
Michael said that people come in and do that, and then I got 2 more years. So
right, that's what I heard. That's what I heard.
I'm still taking stuff from 2022.
So that should be the service we set up. Is an on-demand chemist that can determine whether or not it's the Tylenol will still cure your headache.
Yeah.
So, well, you received incredible knowledge today on the Boombostic Health podcast. Thank you, Emily, for your insight as always. And thanks again to Michael Zaccaro for being a great friend of the show and of mine, and for the amazing work that he did. and frankly for sharing his story. I hope others that hear this are inspired to get out there and make things happen. Typically in healthcare, it is going to be a 10 or 20 year overnight success, but it's worth it because you're making a positive impact on a lot of lives, and also, ultimately can result in a great outcome from a financial perspective. So everybody have a great day. Look forward to seeing you next week on Boombostic Health.